Attention, fellow exhausted parents of tiny tornadoes. Today on Chaos and Caffeine, we have a guest who is basically the fairy godmother of ADHD parenting, except instead of a magic wand, she wields science, deep insight, and probably a well-worn coffee cup. Dr. Taylor Harper is a child psychologist, ADHD expert, and all-around brain wizard who has spent years decoding the beautiful, chaotic minds of neurodivergent kiddos. She's the one who can explain why your child is having a nuclear-level meltdown over the wrong brand of chicken nuggets, why stickers and reward charts are usually a waste of time, and how to actually work with your child's ADHD instead of constantly fighting against it. Can I get an amen? Dr. Harper doesn't just regurgitate clinical jargon. She gets it. She understands the emotional roller coaster that comes with raising an ADHD child and knows that behind every bad behavior is just an unmet need, an overwhelmed nervous system, or let's be real, probably an empty snack plate. So grab your lukewarm coffee. We both know you reheated it 3 times already. Take a deep breath and get ready for some game-changing insights. Dr. Harper is here to drop some serious ADHD wisdom, and trust me, you do not want to miss this, my friend. Dr. Harper, welcome to Chaos and Caffeine.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I am wonderful. So I see you drinking it already, but I need to know what is in your cup.
What is in my cup? So this morning, I actually am kind of solo parenting for the last couple days. So it's a little extra this morning, but coffee, and then I don't do regular milk, so I do oat milk, and some coffee creamer. I probably need something a little stronger than that, but we'll get there when we get there.
I am an iced coffee gal myself, but I have to give
Ah.
myself like a cutoff because then it goes awry. But I could drink it
Oh,
all day for
yes.
sure.
Yes. After like 12 or 1, I will be up forever. I am very much like I need it at a certain time, and then after that I can't do it.
Yeah.
But there's a coffee place by us that got me started on iced coffee because they do a blueberry mocha and it is incredible.
Sounds
Yes.
incredible.
Yes. I've tried to get it other places and it's not the same.
Don't you hate that?
I know. I was
Yeah.
like, I've tried to get people to recreate it and they just don't know how to do it. And so
Yeah.
then it's just, like I had to go to LA for work last week and I tried to get it at another coffee shop and they put, I don't know what this was, if it was like a syrup or like a puree. And so all
Uh,
the blueberry puree was just at the bottom and I just took this massive sip and it was, it was horrible.
uh, definitely a shock.
Yes, yes. It was like one big shot of blueberry.
So you have an extremely impressive resume, psychologist, author, and boy mom. I have
Mm.
to ask, which of those titles have given you the most gray hairs?
Gray hairs. I would say probably being an author, really.
Ooh.
And not for probably the reasons that people think. I've learned over time, and all of my author friends are going to love me for this. I learned over time how hard it is to really be an author because a lot of people don't see it as like a quote unquote job,
Mm.
right? It's just kind of this like side hobby thing. So you're really convincing people a lot to like get on board with what you're doing. So I think that's the hardest thing, right? Is you're selling yourself every day of the week.
Mm.
And so I think that will give me some gray hairs.
Yeah, for sure.
Kids are easy. Kids are the
I strongly disagree.
I think I've gotten used to the chaos, right?
Ah, yeah.
2 boys is just chaotic. So I think I'm just accustomed to that, and we can kind of get into that and how I potentially parent. But that part, yeah, that part makes the most sense to me.
Mm. I love it. I only have one boy, one child altogether. So I am his wrestling partner. I'm his boxing partner. I'm all the things. So,
I I started this thing, so you're gonna learn something kind of unique about me, I guess. And if my dad listens to this, he's gonna love it. So when I was a kid, I used to be obsessed with John Cena. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. So the other night, our oldest, who's 4, wanted to wrestle with me so bad. So like I was gonna make it worth my while, right? I was like, if we're gonna wrestle, fine. So we have speakers in our house, and I turned on like some of the WWE like theme songs, and it made this wrestling match that I had to engage in 17 times better. Like just a million percent better.
I am stealing that for this evening's chaos after school for sure. And he will love that. He is so funny. My son knows who John Cena is, but he cannot say Dwayne Johnson without saying Dwayne The Rock Johnson. So
Oh, yeah, that's fair. And I'm
anytime he says it,
surprised.
yeah, the whole full name out there.
I'm surprised kids don't know him more for like Disney stuff than they do for that. I feel like that was like so long ago.
Yeah,
So I'm surprised they even like associate. So at least he associates that to that because,
yeah.
I feel like if I asked my 4-year-old, he would say Moana. So,
That probably comes with having a 40-year-old mom and he's a 9-year-old. So he's like soaking up the best of all worlds.
oh yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually. Like some of the things that I do that, you know, like even in the last couple days, like I told you, right, not having a laptop, it's been so freeing in a weird way.
Mm.
I'm like, I'm not attached to anything. I'm kind of just out here, you know? So
Winging it.
I definitely integrate that into our lives and try to just make sure that we're not so focused on technology. Our son mainly only gets his iPad when we like go to dinner or something like that. Just so then we create this like fun environment, and so we kind of just segregate it to that, which is really nice because he gets excited about it, and then me and my husband get to talk and eat dinner. So it's a win for
Yeah.
everyone.
I've recently had an ADHD parent coach on, Rich DeChico, who was amazing. And he gave me some tips that I am totally going to use. He said that he hones his son's hyperfocus in for screen time. So, like right now, his son is hyper focused on baseball. So he's like, could
Mhm.
you take this screen time and learn how to bat or, why this certain technique works best? And I was like, man, why didn't I think of that? I'm over here
Yes.
kids YouTubing it. Like,
Yes, yes, you're like you got to find that thing. Yes, that's so that's actually part of a parenting technique that I've been kind of looking into, which is interesting that you bring that up. Because I just started looking into it. So we homeschool both of our kids, and it's a very similar thought process of like you learn the curriculum, right? The things that kids need to know, but then you sort of like hyper focus, right, on the things that they are really interested in that moment. So let's say, my oldest loves Doc McStuffins, right? So we would show him, what it means to be a doctor or things like that. So yeah, I'm all on board for that because
I love that.
I think it's great. I think it's great to kind of use the tools that you have and make it work.
Absolutely. I am totally stealing that from now on. My son is usually always focused on basketball. That's his thing. But over the
Mm,
summer, he was honed in on ping pong. I have no
okay.
idea why. So I'm going to start using that for sure.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like ping pong, like I've seen a lot of pickleball places going up. Um, so I don't know. I feel like I'm really out of the loop at a certain point. I just stopped caring about what was cool. I don't know when that age hit and I just stopped caring, but I've seen those like even when I'm driving, I've seen quite a few kind of popping up here and there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's maybe the new thing. The only thing that I could think of, and I don't watch this, but my husband does, is what is it, The Bachelor, The Bachelorette. They were doing it was like the golden one though. So they were doing
Nah.
pickleball. So I don't know if that made it a thing or not, but I think we're kind of in that realm.
So that just solidified something for me that you were talking about. So it may have come from this past summer, we learned how to play pickleball, which we
Yeah.
had a blast doing. But he eventually was like, Mom, there's only old people here. So I was like, ah, that's hurtful. So now he doesn't want to play because there's only old people there. And now that you said Golden Bachelor, I'm like, ah, he was right. It's just me.
Yes,
I'm
they
just
had like
old.
a whole tournament like on the show. You can go back and watch it. The pickleball
I
tournament.
will not be be watching my future, which is apparently closer than I had anticipated.
Yeah, you're just practicing for the future, right? Like that's totally okay. I used to golf in high school. I think it's going to take me miles, you know? I can
Mm,
play it my whole life.
yeah.
So I feel like it's important to kind of learn those things that, you can take with you forever. Our youngest played tennis one time. I took him to play tennis, and it was kind of like the funniest thing because he was the youngest one by a good, it was the middle of the day, like on a Tuesday. And so he
Mm.
was the youngest one there by a good 40 years, at least, minimum 40 years. And all of these people were watching him and just like so excited to see him like engaging and like hitting the ball. And we were just kind of running back and forth and making it fun. And this guy came over to me after and he said, he named off a famous tennis player and he was like, he's got like he's using the same arm as this like famous tennis player because I guess my son was using his left arm instead of his right. And I was like, okay, sure sounds good. If he wants to play tennis, cool. Right? Like whatever you want to do. And that's something that we've focused on too, right? I know that in a traditional school setting, they usually make them pick a hand. He's never picked a hand. So he's 4. He's never picked a hand. And sometimes we'll see him using his left. Sometimes we'll see him using his right. Sometimes it just kind of depends on what he feels the most comfortable with, which is kind of cool to watch because he will write with both hands. Um, he'll traditionally only eat with his right hand. Sometimes we'll catch him with the left, but it's kind of interesting to see which one he naturally flows to.
Mhm.
So that's been some of the kind of cool little unique things that we've seen kind of come out of homeschooling.
I want to hear your backstory, but I want to know if your line of work led you to homeschool or what made that decision.
I know. The schooling people are going to come for me for this, and that's fine. Um, um, I just started to realize, and like there are so many teachers that I think have so many incredible intentions. Like, let me make that very clear. When I go home to do reading across America, the first thing I wanted to do was see like my own second grade teacher, right? I think he was amazing. Um, I think there's so many teachers that are just really trying to do like the really good work, right? But they don't have the resources.
Mm.
There's too many kids in a classroom, right? And so I kind of see the flip side of that, right? I work in community mental health, so I see the kids that are falling through the cracks and they're just kind of allowing them to fall through the cracks, right?
Yeah.
And so I never wanted to put myself in a situation where our child was potentially, not that I think that would happen, but potentially falling through the cracks, right? And not getting the help that he needs, right? If that be the case. And so our oldest actually was born in 2020. And so for the first year, it was just me and my husband. Like that was it. Our family's all back in the Midwest. It was just the two of us. And so when it came time to think about that, I just couldn't process a world where I dropped him off for 6 hours and was like, bye, see you later. And
Mm.
I never saw him until those 6 hours were over.
Yeah.
And so eventually it just kind of transitioned that way and we worked around it. And I'm not telling you it's easy, right? Like I'm a child psychologist for work. I'm also a book author. My husband runs his own company. Like it is not an easy feat by any means. But I see so much value in it and I see the dynamic between my two kids and how much they like genuinely love and care about each other. And then I see the dynamic between like me and my husband and our kids and like how much time we really get to spend with them, right? Like I can go downstairs right now and they're going to be there. And I can say hello and like I also get to be a part of their day to day, but I also get to be a part of like the food, right? Which I think is so important to me,
Yeah.
right? Like other countries are doing way better with food, right?
Agreed.
Like we just give our kids like, and I'm reliving this because I think it's absolutely gross, but those like 1990s like cardboard pizza, whatever that was, that was disgusting, right? But that was a considered lunch, right? And so I think there was just so many things that I started to open my eyes to when it was like my moment to recognize that. And then I started reading some like Nordic parenting books and things like that. And it all just kind of really sank in for me that like kids don't need that functional version of school so young, right? Like if he decides at 10 or whatever that he wants to go to school, okay, great. We'll hit that hurdle when we get there. But 4, 5, 6, 7, they need to run, they need to be outside, they need to, be doing all of those things that are required to be a child, right? And this is my rant for today, but I see this every day of my life, right? A kid comes in, mom's like, I think he has ADHD. And I'm like, okay, well, let's walk that path. What is your kid eating? How's your kid sleeping? Right? Those are the first two things I'm asking them, right? If your kid's eating Fruit Loops and then you're sending your kid off to school and then the teacher's like, hey, your kid can't sit down. Well, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Right? Like your kid's not really processing sugar that well. Okay. Right. But then we see the kids that like genuinely need that assistance, right? And we're not really giving it to them.
Mm.
And so I see this like literally every day of my life. And it just kind of opened my eyes to the reality of like, what do I want my kid's day to look like? And so he gets to spend, all day with his brother, maybe like it, maybe don't.
Yeah.
But they really get to just be kids and be outside. And like, I've seen sort of a shift too, where a lot of schools are nature based or like preschools are more nature based. And there's like a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'll give you a quick little statistic. So like, how long do you think my 4-year-old is supposed to be able to sit in a chair?
Reasonably for me, like 6 seconds. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
2 minutes max.
You're not that far off. 1 minute for every year of life.
Yeah.
And so how do we expect kids to sit in a chair for 30, 40, an hour, 2 hours, right? Like that's just so unrealistic. And
Yeah.
then, the teacher's overwhelmed because they have, 20, 30 kids. And so this one kid is creating problems. And so then it's, well, this kid has this kid has that. And not to say that they don't, because I've definitely met some children that absolutely do. But a lot of the kids just need something different.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my process. It was a lengthy one, but and my
No.
husband was not on board. We both went to like a traditional school and he was like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "You just have to flow with me on this one. You just have
Yeah.
to trust me."
Yeah. I love that. I spoke to a mom. Don't let me go down the rabbit hole, but very quickly, I spoke to a mom this week and she was telling me that she was struggling with her 4-year-old. And I was like, how so? And she said, well, he won't sit still at his sister's basketball games. And I was like, he's not supposed to. Like,
Yeah.
what are we talking about? He's 4, and there's the lights and the action. And
Oh,
I mean,
all
I'm
of it.
sure it's noisy and there's new kids to meet. And like, there's no way. Like, my son's 9 and I can't expect him to go and sit down for
Mhm.
an hour basketball game. So I totally get that.
Right. And
Yes.
that is the problem is like parents, we are so focused on what other people think and
Mm-hmm.
how other people are going to perceive what you're doing, right? Oh, my kid's running around, right? Like my kid's doing this, my kid's doing that. But that goes back to parenting style too, right? Like
Yeah.
I parent vastly different than my mother did. I parent vastly different than my grandparents did, right? And they sometimes look at me like a little, they like tilt their head and they're like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah.
Um, but I know that what I'm doing is coming from a genuine place of connection, right? And I always focus on connection,
Yeah.
right? So if my kid needs to run around at a basketball game, let's figure that out,
Yeah.
right? Or expectation, I would say, okay, then, maybe dad can watch him or whatever the case might be, right? If he can't sit through that, then fine, I don't, I shouldn't and don't expect that.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot of parents sometimes expect a little too much. And
Mm.
I have to, and I do it sometimes too, right? I absolutely am not, remotely perfect, and I will have my moments 1,000%, but I think it's just remembering that connection piece is so important because you are creating another like human being and you are shaping who they become as a person.
Mm.
And so the worst thing you can do is use disconnection as a way to get what I would call obedience.
Yeah. We started this thing, which we're emotionally dysregulated over here. So we don't do timeouts anymore because it
Yeah.
felt like to me I was sending my kid off to process those emotions or saying those emotions are not allowed. So now we do time ins where we just sit and we're both pissed off until we cool off. But that was really important to me because I was like, man, I'm like, and maybe he needs that, maybe he needs that time and that's fine too.
Mhm.
But I was like, man, I'm sending him away for a normal emotion that he can
Mhm.
totally have. So I was like, you
Mhm.
know what, just come back and let's sit and we'll just co-regulate.
We have never done timeout in our house ever, period. I felt the same way. I felt like it felt more disconnected and it felt like it was more me trying to regulate my own feelings versus what was actually going on with him. So Again, my husband gets to go down the gets to go down the rabbit hole along with me. Um, but when our oldest was really little, and I use him as a lot of examples because our youngest is only one, so we're kind of in the midst of this weird, not necessarily using a whole lot of parenting techniques, right, but kind of more modeling.
Yeah.
Um, when he started to throw those like bigger tantrums right at 2 or, 2.5, which he didn't really have a lot of those. And I think it's because we really focused on connection over disconnection, right? But when he did, I would just sit down on the floor with him, right? I wasn't going to waver in the fact that I said no to something, right? Because that's terrible. Don't give in.
Yeah.
Um, but I sat down, I said, I hear you, I see you, I love you, and I'm ready when you're ready to talk, right? And so now he will ask for that. I don't even need to do anything about that, right? So if he's having a meltdown, he'll be like, Mom, can you hold me? I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay, no problem. And so one of the things that I've actually learned from another parent, which is kind of cool, um, kids with big feelings, right? She went to a workshop, I believe it was in San Diego, and they said cool the body temperature down. So what we'll do is I'll like turn on the fan, or some kids can get like an ice pack or something like that and just kind of cool themselves down a little bit, especially those kids that have really, really big feelings.
Mm.
Um, so we do that sometimes if we need to. Normally I'll turn on the fan and I'll just hold him, and I'll hold him underneath the fan, and it de-escalates pretty quickly, and then we can talk about it, right? But it's always that talking about it piece that is so important. I always say, like, you don't want to point out that there's a no swimming sign when someone is drowning.
Mm.
Right? Like, that's not the moment to be like, hey, look at this sign. Did you see it back there? It says no
Yeah.
swimming, right? You need to get them out of that moment first, right? And then we can talk about it, right? A lot of parents are like, don't do this, don't do that. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't have done that, right? They like trip and fall on something you told them 15 times not to do. And they're crying, and you're like, hey, remember that time I told you not to do that?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, they don't even hear you. They're crying, they're in pain, whatever it might be, right? So it's one of those things that I get it as a parent. It's so frustrating to explain the same thing 15 times. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I explain the same thing, but also setting the expectation, right? Like if we are going somewhere and I need him to do something specifically, right? We went to a birthday party over the weekend. And again, I was like solo parenting. My husband's on a work trip, and I said, hey, buddy, this is what we need to do, right? I have you and I have your brother, so I have to watch you both, right? I know that you're going to have fun at this birthday party. I know you're going to love it. However, I really need you to check in with me, right? And just be like, hey, mom, still here, you know. And so I'm setting those expectations long in advance, on the car ride there. And then I'm reminding him when we get in, right? Because it's exciting and it's fun and it's all of those things. So half the things I say are going to go out the window.
Yeah.
But um, just continuing to remind him, right? But then I also don't leave it on him to follow through, right? Like I'm there to watch him, right? So I'm still not going to assume that he's going to like completely follow through. Like complete obedience from a 4-year-old is wild to me. Like when
Yeah.
I see, that's one of the scariest things I see. And I know people are going to be like, what? When I see a child who is completely obedient, that kind of scares me
Mm.
because that tells me that there's a reason,
Yeah.
right? That they're totally obedient. Um, so that I would say that scares me the most,
Yeah.
to be honest.
I can see that.
It's one of those things that I just kind of look and I'm like, is your kid having fun? Is
Mm.
your kid, are they allowed to be themselves in this setting? Um, so yeah, I would say out of anything that I've ever worked with, I've worked in severe mental illness, I've worked with kids, I've worked with adults. I would say a completely obedient child that is like insanely well-mannered. And let me make this clear, for a non-appropriate age, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're, 15 and they're well-mannered, okay, great, amazing. Um, but a 3, 4-year-old who just stands there and waits for instruction, that kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah. Probably a little fearful at home.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've seen it in, everyone will say, "Oh, your kid's so well behaved," and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. And I just kind of leave it there because not my job.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Looking for some new toys and tools that your ADHD kiddos will love? Play Therapy Supply has you covered with a great selection of toys, games, and fidgets that can be used by ADHD children, their parents, caregivers, and professionals alike. From fidget toys that help children calm down, de-stress, and focus, to social emotional learning resources to help kids understand their feelings and emotions, to games and activities designed to improve emotional regulation. Play Therapy Supply has it all. For thousands of items and fast and free shipping, visit playtherapysupply.com today. That leads me back after I've taken you all over the map, and I haven't even got to the first legit
Mm,
question yet, but I wanted
sure.
to know, every expert has a story. What led you to focus on kids and their mental health?
Ooh. Okay, so, well, you can thank one of my teachers actually for this. So I was pre-med in college and I had an anatomy teacher and I got my first C. And I will never forget this woman. She walked up to me and she was like, "You're never going to be a doctor, blah, blah, blah," which now I know is absolutely absurd. But back then, when you're in college and you're kind of, you know, gullible to what would be deemed like authority, right? You start to listen. So I spiraled for a little while. And then I went into my like counseling session for the next year to pick my classes. And my advisor was like, "Hey, you have almost a minor in psychology." And I was like, "Well, how's that possible? I didn't sign up for anything." And he said, "It's just the electives that you have taken." And so I kind of sat there and I was like, huh, okay. And so I went back and I thought about it. And I was like, if I'm naturally taking these classes, that tells me that it's of interest to me, right? And that tells me that I'm good at it, right? Like if it comes easily to me. And so I changed my major and I started down that path. And then I started my master's almost immediately after I finished undergraduate. Um, and I started it in clinical counseling. Um, that process was kind of interesting. One of my least favorite experiences from my master's was, and one of my really good friends is going to love this because she'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, we would sit in a room and you would have like another student and you would essentially like counsel them, right? But like your teacher would be in your ear. And so it was like practice, right? But he was like watching on this camera from like another room. And so he would just pop in randomly and start talking. And it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable. So it was one of those things that I was like, oh gosh, okay. And I'm a like generally pretty anxious person. I've gotten better over the years, but that's taken a lot of practice. And that's how I got into meditation and mindfulness and things like that. And so then I actually started taking a meditation and mindfulness class in college. I'm not going to tell you that it had good intentions. It was mainly like, I think I'm going to get to sleep at 9:30 in the morning. And so I started taking the class and I just kind of fell in love with it. And so I did a few more classes and just kind of went down that path. And then we moved to Southern California and I finished my doctorate out here. And I started off in severe mental illness and absolutely loved that. I loved it. Some of the people that I met were just absolutely incredible people. And just to kind of see their experience, right? And to see a lot of these, adults had their whole life ahead of them, right? Like, because most people who get diagnosed with schizophrenia do in like their early 20s. So one of the guys that I did therapy with, um, was a professional soccer player. And then, one day it just completely flipped. So I really, really enjoyed that experience and kind of walking through that with them. And then I think the kids thing kind of naturally flowed after a while when I had kids. It just kind of seemed to be the thing that came really easily to me. Like having kids, and I know, people may hate me for this one, but having kids comes so easily to me. And that is because of my own lived experiences. But I come from just such a good place of connection and love and just wanting what's best for them. And I think that's where it becomes easy, right? Because
Yeah.
I was so accustomed to kind of putting what everyone else's needs first. And so now it's easy for me. Now I'm like, okay, that's no different than my own life, right? Like, and not to say that I don't prioritize myself because I absolutely do. I love going to the sauna and working out and doing all of those things, but I think that process came so naturally to me that now working with kids, I just wanted to help other parents be able to parent not identical to me, because I think everyone's path is their own, but in a way that came from a place of connection and love versus what I saw, which is this like authoritative, timeout driven, um, just not from a place of love. It was just like, why? Like, why are we doing this? And it's to foster obedience. And that's kind of what kids see all day is
Yeah.
obedience, right? They go to school and they want you to be obedient. You come home and they want you to be obedient. Like, when are you supposed to be a kid? When is that supposed to happen?
Yeah.
Um, and so and it's funny because I just was having a very random conversation with a friend the other day. She texted me and said, "Hey, I think we're going to homeschool our son. What did you do? How did you do it? Kind of walk me through that process." And we started just kind of chit-chatting, and she said, the thing that really opened my eyes was this book. And I immediately knew what she was talking about. Like, didn't even have to ask. And I will share that with you. It's by John Gatto. It's called Weapons of Mass Instruction. And I was immediately like, "Is this the book?" And she was like, "Yeah." And then she was like, "My husband read it and he was like, we need to get our son out of school now. We need to like," and that's such a bigger, longer topic. But yeah, to finish up, I got into kids because I just fell in love with my own.
Mm.
And it was so easy and so natural. And I just wanted to give other parents that level of connection that I had with them, right? And kind of give them back this connection where I feel like we're just so focused on obedience.
Yeah. I want to preface what I'm about to say as my son has an amazing school.
Yeah.
His teachers, his principal, they're all amazing. And this is probably not the correct way to handle this, but he doesn't fit into the mold of school. He just
Yeah.
doesn't. Most kids don't. But we, so that he does not internalize that, we started making fun of, imagine how boring it would be if you fit in, or
Yeah.
like, he's like, Mom, and I'm like, how boring must they be, to be able to sit there for 7 hours and like not in front of the kids and we would
Yeah.
never say it, but like we have to joke about it because I
Totally.
don't want him to feel like, man, something's wrong with me, I can't do what they do. And I was like, that's totally not what's happening here. So
Mhm.
probably not the best way to handle it, but much rather him giggle with me than think he's a bad kid.
Yes, yes. You can tell him. Um, my my own husband got diagnosed with ADHD later in life, and I call him a serial entrepreneur. Uh, he has started quite a few companies, even since we've been together. And he is a little chaotic sometimes, but he is one of the most just when he sets his mind to something, one of the most creative, like capable people I've ever seen. He can do things that I can't comprehend.
Mm,
But then he'll forget to do the dishes, right?
yeah.
So it's this kind of weird trade-off. Um, I'm like, "Sweetheart, you started a company this week, but you can't remember to take out the trash." It's just
Yeah.
wild. Um, so I think everyone kind of has their own path and everyone has their, way of going about things. And so, I think you have to do what's best for your kid. And there's an amazing, like, and I don't know this human being at all. I can't even tell you who wrote the book. So there's no promotional
Yeah.
response here. There's nothing that just happens that way or something like that. And it's this adorable little story about a kid, and he kind of does all these really weird, interesting things, and it kind of takes you through his head. And, you know, it's just so cute and adorable. So I'm probably gonna send it to you after this, but I can't remember the name of it. And I feel like this author is gonna be like, "Oh man, I wish you would have remembered the name of that."
We will still put it in the show notes.
Yes, it is. It is downstairs. It is in our space, and it's incredible.
I love that. On the same note, before I promise I'll get back on track, um, he had a really hard first grade year. He's in fourth grade now, but first grade was really hard. And that's when he started the I'm a bad kid and
Yeah.
things like that. So I wanted to let him know, right now it's hard, but one day, ADHD is going to take you so far. So every Sunday night, we read the story of an extremely successful person,
Mm.
sometimes billionaires, who have ADHD that have made it, just to show him, and most of the time they're people who have struggled in the academic setting, but later in life have went really far. So I just want him to know, and all kids to know,
Yeah.
you might not fit in now, but one day your hyper focus is going to take you so far.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Like I said, and I'm happy to let him kind of talk to my husband because I think it's one of those things that I think sometimes he sees as like a negative thing, right? Because the world sees it as a negative thing. I don't necessarily see it as good, bad, or indifferent, right? And that's with every like diagnosis that I come across, right? It's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just who you are,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's like so important. It's especially with kids with ADHD, like I know that our 4-year-old looking back, I didn't do homeschooling for this reason, but it was just kind of a byproduct of it. Um, our oldest is one of the most sensitive people ever, and like he picks up on things. And so I, like looking back, I know we made the right decision, but I couldn't fathom the kind of kid that he would be if he was in that setting because I just think he takes things he's just one of those kids that's really sensitive and takes things really kind of personally.
yeah,
And so you really have to watch how you word things with him, right? Because he's also very smart.
yeah,
He's like insanely smart. Sometimes like my family will laugh at some of the things that come out of his mouth. But I just can't imagine like the light that I might not see in him
mm,
if he was in that setting. And again, this is not a rant on teachers or schools or anything of that nature. Like I think everyone has to walk their own path. Um, but for me, it just kind of naturally happened, and I'm so glad that we did it that way because I just couldn't couldn't envision the version of him that I would have now because I think we'd be seeing the same thing, right? He'd be coming home saying, "I'm a bad kid. I can't follow directions. I can't do this. I can't do that." Like I remember one time someone like had asked him, like, are you being a good listener today? Are you following directions? And so like every like a couple times a week he'll ask me, Mom, like, Mom, am I following directions? And I'm like, but you're fine. It's fine. We're fine.
yeah,
It's okay. You're doing a great job. Right?
yeah,
Like it's okay. And so he just really kind of holds those things in.
mm,
And so I think if he was in that setting and like he wasn't following the rules exactly to a T, I could definitely see where it would have negatively impacted him.
yeah. We were at a birthday party over the weekend, and Dad was calling his nieces and nephews bad kids because they're rowdy.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Ah, don't do that." I was like, "That is their internal voice from now on, telling them that they are bad kids. Like, don't do
Yes.
that,
Yes,
please."
and then they come to me when they're
Yeah,
like 15 or 16, and I have to explain to them that their internal voice is their, parents or caregivers or whoever it might be, right? And the example that I give is when I first went to college, I was in downtown Chicago and there are a lot of like alleys, right? And so as a female, you're always kind of hyper taught to like avoid this or avoid that or don't do this or don't do that, right? And so I would like walk past these alleys, especially if I had a night class, and I would like get nervous and I'm like, why am I like I had to take a step back and be like, why am I even nervous? Like this doesn't make sense.
mm,
Nothing has ever happened to me, right? But it was that internal voice telling me like, someone had said that along the way, and so my brain had picked up on it.
yeah,
And it was just, it's just one of those things that like and I'm not telling you that you have to be like super perfect because I don't think that's true. And that's like not even my whole motto, right?
yeah,
That's not my whole life motto, but I do think we have to be really cautious about what we say to kids and how we say it, right? And a lot of times, like I said, like you're in a setting where there's 20, 30 kids, right? And this teacher is just doing the best they can. And, so things will inevitably come out and, maybe they should or shouldn't or whatever the case might be. But as an example, I had someone maybe like a year ago. come to me and say, at the time her daughter was 9 and she said, oh my gosh, like the teacher sent home an email basically insinuating that her child had ADHD and that they should go to the pediatrician. And I said, okay, give me a minute. I said, let me read the email. And so I read through the email and I said, everywhere that you see distracted, I want you to put bored. And she was like, you're right, she's bored. And I'm like, yeah, she's bored. She's a 9-year-old and she's in what class is this again? She's like, math. I'm like, ah, okay. So instead of following the path of going to the pediatrician, right? The pediatrician most likely recommending medication because no offense to pediatricians, I think you all are great. And we have an absolutely incredible pediatrician who I will not name because I don't want anyone stealing him. Um, uh, but that's not really what you were like trained for, right? That's not really your wheelhouse. So I think it's kind of a wild system to say that like pediatricians can recommend medications like that, right? Because that's just not really like their realm of expertise.
Mhm.
And I didn't go into medication because that's not my wheelhouse, right? And so, they go to the pediatrician and then they get medication and then we kind of start this vicious cycle, right? But that's not really helping. It's just putting a band-aid on it,
Yeah.
right? Because the problem is still there. You're just medicating the child,
Yeah.
right? It's not really fixing the problem. So I told her, I said, listen, I said, how about you get her like a math tutor, right? I said, let's start there. Let's see what happens. Gets her a math tutor. She's still going to the math tutor to this day. Her grades are perfectly fine. It was just the math tutor taught her in a way that she really understood,
Mm.
in a way that made it fun for her, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't, it could have potentially been another kid who went down this, path who didn't really actually need medication. And like that's my job most days is to sift through the kids that actually need it and the kids that don't.
Yeah.
And so that's why we go through like, how's your kid sleeping? What's your kid eating? We obviously do like psychological tests, right? But a lot of it is like environment related, right? Like, what are you doing to help your child, right? If your kid's not running around screaming at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, then like you can't expect them to be ready for bed, right?
Yes.
Like,
So much, yes. I hope parents would like the first few steps after diagnosis, which is pretty much a lot of what you just said: nutrition, sleep
yeah,
schedule, routine. And that is like one of the biggest things with sleep when parents are like, my kid won't sleep. And I'm like, well, are they getting enough physical activity during the day? And they're like,
yeah.
what does that have to do with sleep? And I was like, everything. Like,
Mhm,
it has everything to do with sleep. If they're not
mhm.
tired, especially if we have extra energy, which we do, we need to
Yeah.
get it out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, our kid on the day to day, if mom has time, he goes and does a fun activity, right? One of our friends just asked us to do like a day camp, with our oldest. So he's gonna go to that. And then we do like some homeschooling co-ops if we have time for that during the day. But
Yeah.
if not, he's outside, he's doing things, he's taking walks, he's, playing games, he's doing all of these things that I think just to really help him get out energy, right? And he's learning at the same time. It doesn't need to be so like rigid,
Yeah.
right? He can learn to count while he's counting the flowers outside, right? It doesn't matter that he's sitting at a desk, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that I always go back to, and I'll never forget this because it was just so, I think it was so impactful for me. I was working in ABA, um, and some of it I really loved. Some of it I felt like it was really making a difference for some, especially some of the adults who were in ABA. But I had a child, and the mom was very hyper focused on the fact that her kid couldn't sit in a chair like the other kids.
Mm.
And so my supervisor came in and she's like holding the child down while he's in a chair, not like holding him down, but she kind of like cornered him. So I shouldn't say holding him down because they're going to come for me on this one. Um, but like kind of cornering him, right? And, setting a timer and saying you have to sit in the chair for this long. And I just kind of looked at that and I was like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we doing this? He was kicking, he was screaming, he did not want to be a part of it. It was awful. And I'm like, is he getting his homework done? Well, yeah. Okay, then why does it matter, right? If I was in the middle of this podcast and I decided I want to take a walk, like I can do that, right?
Yeah.
It would be a little interesting, but it's not like I can't, right? And so I think that's the thing is we tell kids all the time what they can't do. It's a constant no, can't. can't, right? All day people are telling them, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do this. So something we try to implement in our house a lot is like, if we're going to say no, how can we reword that so it doesn't feel so authoritative,
Yeah.
right? And just being able to reword that again fosters that connection. So it's not so hyper focused on what mom and dad need, right? But what's best for you, right? If
Yeah.
it's a safety issue, then like, yeah, yeah, I'm going to be yelling no, right? Like if you are attempting to play with fire, I'm going to say no,
Yeah.
right? Like, but I think that just comes with like, again, checking in with yourself too and being like, am I tired? Am I exhausted? Right? Like, I will definitely find myself getting more agitated with our older one when I'm tired, right? And that's a fair thing to feel, but I shouldn't take it out on him because it's not his fault.
That leads me into a question that is not on my list, just so we're clear. But you said you had studied meditation and mindfulness, and I feel like what you just said is a lot of self work. Being
Yeah.
able to recognize that we are tired or hungry or overwhelmed, and then that way we don't take it out on our kids. Did that class help you in parenting now, or is there any aha moments from that?
I wouldn't say that it helped me with parenting. I think it's just, I think the biggest thing that I took from meditation is being able to check in with yourself, right? In the moment, right? Because you can reverse like how the situation is going, right? If you're able to check in with yourself in the moment, right? So I kind of see myself going down a path where like I'm being very negative or I can feel kind of the energy shifting, right? Like then I can say, okay, like maybe I need to take a minute or maybe I just need to like step away for a second. But again, it's recognizing how you feel, right? And I think a lot of people don't do that. We just talk to like we listen to respond. We don't listen to actually hear what someone's saying. And I think that's the biggest thing is stopping to just listen and pay attention, right? And we work on that with our oldest like a lot. I'm like, slow down, slow down. It's okay. Um, but I also am just one of those people, and I make the joke all the time to my husband that I would have been like an incredible 1950s housewife because everything mundane, I just love it. I love it. Like cooking, cleaning. I could just put my headphones on and like be in my own little world and like I will be totally fine.
Yeah,
Like, so I think I'm just more of a slow-paced person to begin with, and I'm not very emotional, in the sense of like I can kind of take my emotions out of things. And I think that's really helpful is being able to just kind of separate how you feel from like what is reality.
mm,
Right. And that's a really hard thing to do. And it takes time. But yes, meditation, mindfulness definitely helped me sort of see that like just because there's a, I call it like just because there's a tornado going on around me doesn't mean I need to respond. Right.
yeah,
And I think that's the thing is like everyone tries to always respond, right? We always have to have this immediate response, right? With email, with cell phone, with the whole thing, right? And it's like you can just stop and hang up. Like
yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing is just slowing down. I mean,
yeah.
just genuinely slowing down.
So now a selfish follow up. Having a kid who is not programmed to slow down, how could I
Sure.
teach him mindfulness techniques? How do you teach those?
Sure. Yeah, my 4-year-old doesn't know how to slow down either. He is one of the sweetest but most chaotic creatures. I, um, him. And so for me, it's really like getting on his level, right? If I really need him to focus on something, I will get on his level, right? I'll look him right in the face and sometimes I'll like squish his face and I'm like, I need you to slow down. Right. I will
Yeah,
literally, it's that simple. Like, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm not trying to, like, I will literally just like come up and I will find connection with him, right? I'll look him right in the eyes. And that's the thing that we're missing too, right? Because we're so like, and I know people won't be able to see this, but we're so ingrained with this cell phone
yes,
and we're not looking people in the face. And I just will get as close to him as humanly possible. And I will be like, slow down. And sometimes I need to be a little extreme, right? So sometimes if I'm being extreme, I will just attempt to be over the top, right? I will tickle him. I will like do the whole thing, right? And then I'll be like, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's relax. Let's figure this out, right? Okay. So actually a friend taught us this. And it's so funny, like I'm realizing throughout the throughout this like podcast, I'm like, a friend taught us this or a friend taught us that, right? Like
Yeah.
I learn things from people all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, so to say that I'm like the perfect, like, perfect person who isn't learning from anyone is crazy. But our oldest is obsessed with Hocus Pocus. That is his jam. Um, I love Halloween, and so it was one of those things that just kind of naturally evolved. But one of our good friends, she tells her kids, she says, Hocus Pocus, it's time to, and then she'll like pause, and then they'll say focus. And so that's really worked for him in just the sense of like, that's his favorite thing, right? So I'll just kind of yell that and he will stop and he'll be like, oh, okay, now I gotta like pay attention, right? So
Yeah.
just kind of simple things like that, right? We're not sitting in the corner meditating for 20 minutes. That's
Yeah.
not, that's not what we're doing here. And I think that's the thing is like sometimes when parents see like my children's books that focus on meditation and mindfulness, they think they're gonna be sitting in the corner with their kid trying to like get them to sit down and meditate and do all of those things, right? But that's not what we're doing here. We're teaching them coping skills.
Yeah.
Um, so we do like monster breathing, right? Where they get to breathe in really big and they get to breathe out and they get to roar, right? And they kind of get to do all these fun activities that they don't really know are useful in the future, right? And that's kind of what we want to create is these like healthy habits. And so I'm actually doing a parent and me class in beginning of March for parents who want to do like a meditation mindfulness class with me. We're gonna like do some fun stuff. They get like one of my books at the end. It's gonna be so fun. And I'm like super excited about it because I genuinely like when I wrote these books, it was meant for our oldest. So he was like 6 months old. And then I just realized, like, if I can give this to other people, like, that's amazing.
Mm.
And so that kind of whole process just kind of fell into my lap. But yeah, we're not like sitting in the corner, doing any of those things. It's just the little things that you do every day. And I know that's hard, right? Being constantly attentive, being constantly engaged, right? But when we take a step back and we realize that like the barriers between us being a really connected parent and us not are the things that don't really matter, right? They're this thing, right? Like in yeah, like they're like your cell phone, they're your laptop, right? It's all those things that you're not really the TV, right? Like, and not to say that we don't watch, Bluey and all of those things, we do,
Yeah.
but it's finding that connection again, right? And I say it time and time and time again, like just slowing down and being intentional about what we're doing, right? And sometimes my husband will ask me, like, why does he listen so much better for you? Why does he do this? Why does he do that? And I'm like, because I'm very intentional about what I'm doing and I'm very honed in when it is my time with the kids, right? Like we have a very pretty strict schedule because we're both pretty busy when it is my time, that means it's my time, right? It's not my time to be sitting and doing work. It's not my time to be doing 10 other things. It's my time with them. And that's
Yeah.
important to me.
Mm. I love that so much. Earlier, when you were saying you couldn't imagine sending your child to daycare or school for 6 hours and not seeing them, I think the biggest lie that I told myself as a mom was I'm going to have this baby, and 8 weeks later, I'm going to go back to work full time. And 10 years later, that has like not happened. It's just
Yes.
not happened at all. So I
Oh,
resonate
I
with that
mean,
deeply.
when I was 20 years old, I thought I was just going to be like head CEO, like blah, 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 blah. Right. And it's funny because I think my husband kind of struggled the most with that transition of seeing me become like a parent and seeing my priorities so rapidly shift.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm not doing anything, right? Like all of those things are still happening. It's just my priorities as a parent have just so rapidly shifted,
Yeah.
right? I don't care about being that massive CEO anymore. I don't care, right? My ultimate goal is to be able to spend the most time possible with them. And some people are like, "Oh, you're like a helicopter parent." No, 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 no. No, it's not because I want control over them. It's that I genuinely enjoy spending time with them. And like some people always roll their eyes and they're like, "Yeah, I'm sure you do." Right? Um, but it's absolutely true because once you foster that incredible connection and once you take that time to really get to know your kid and to be with your child and see all of those amazing little things that they do, like even I was cracking up laughing before I came on here. Our youngest is so technically he's like 15 months and he was doing something he knew that he shouldn't. And so he was walking and he had turned his head back and like gave this little like, I know that I'm doing something I shouldn't, but I'm going to do it anyways, right? And those are just such like little moments in the day that you're just like, oh, I'm so appreciative that I'm there for that, right? That I
Yeah.
get to experience that, right? And so yes, I was finishing up my doctorate when our oldest was born. And so there was a time and place where we were in COVID and he was sitting on my lap during class. Right? Like he was like this Velcro baby and he was just kind of sitting on my lap. And I was like, this is just what it is. You're just gonna have to be okay with it, right? Like
Yeah.
I will mute myself, but like you're gonna have to be okay with it. Like I'm a parent first.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is like we're always trying to run in circles and do so many things and be so many things to so many people. And I have sort of meshed all of those things together so that I can make it work, right? Because I think moms are just these incredible people who are just trying to do it all. And it's hard. It's tough, right? There are days where dishes don't get done. There are days where, the house looks chaotic. But if I go to bed and I feel like I've had a good connection with them and I've had a good day with them, then like the rest can kind of wait.
I love that so much. Taylor, I could do this all day, but I know you have little ones waiting on you. So I want you to come back because I've taken you all over the map. Easily ADHD, distracted by something shiny. You are an award-winning author and you are heading on a book tour. And I would love for you to tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, so because I'm a children's book author, I'm doing Reading Across America, which is like the first week of March. I'm actually going back to my hometown, which will be super exciting. And yeah, like I said, I'm doing if anyone is in the San Clemente area, I'm doing a meditation and mindfulness class for kids and parents and future parents. In with Foundation Pilates. I am just kind of all over the map. So it's fun. I love all of this stuff. I love being able to help parents have better connections and help siblings have better connections too. Like I genuinely enjoy seeing those bonds kind of come together because, we tell our oldest all the time, like, that's your sibling. That's it. That's all you have. Right.
Mm,
And so I hate when I see like siblings who don't get along or, can't really function well together. It's like, oh, that's like such a missed opportunity.
yeah.
I'm around. I'm kind of going all these places, but it's fun and I love it. And the kids get to come along and
Mm,
and they get to see family, which is great. It's kind of another excuse for me to go see family. So
yeah.
it's fun.
That is fun. I love that you get to go home and serve a purpose in that. That's wonderful. So I guess my last question would be, we've covered so much about what we can do to help our kids in roundabout ways, but if you could leave parents with one single bit of advice in this crazy, beautiful mess that we call life, what would it be?
Slow down.
Mm,
Slow down. Like, I genuinely, it goes by so fast. And like, I just think we are just trying to be everything to everyone, right? Like, and my biggest, I guess, piece of advice would be to remember who matters if you weren't around, right? And those are the people that I focus on, right? My work, I love my job, but my work would replace me,
mm,
right? And that's just what it is. That's just life, right? Like, and so, but my kids can't. They can't, right? Like my husband can't. I mean, he can, but
yeah.
but it wouldn't be
She
the
would
same
not
thing.
be as cool as us,
Yes,
okay?
not be as cool, and also would not be, my children's biological mother.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I just kind of remember that, right? Is like who would really be at a disadvantage if I wasn't there.
Mm,
Um, and so that's where I focus my time and energy. So I'd say, I get it. You have to go to work. You have to make money, right? You have to provide for your family, but also don't forget who would miss out if you weren't there, right? Who would miss out if you are so like busy working that you forget to take care of your health, right? So I guess biggest piece of advice would just be remember who needs you most.
mm. I love that. That was the perfect ending. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I'm happy to come back and I could talk all day long.
Yeah, me too, girl. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
All right, my friends, that's a wrap on today's episode of Chaos and Caffeine. A huge thanks to Dr. Taylor Harper for dropping some serious ADHD parenting wisdom, because let's be real, we all need that. Now, if this episode hit home for you, if you had that, oh my God, that's why my kid does that moment, do me a favor, hit the follow, maybe leave a review, but definitely share this episode with another ADHD parent who desperately needs to hear it. Your support helps keep us bringing in badass experts like Dr. Harper to make ADHD parenting just a little less chaotic. Until next time, keep caffeinating, keep surviving, and remember, you are not screwing up your kid. You've got this.